All right, this is Unit 9, Motivation and Emotion. Again, this is Unit 8 in the textbook. This is the fourth video. I'm doing it a little out of order. So this is the fourth part of the textbook. It covers pages 359 to 362. And this is really going to look at the hierarchy of needs and that sense of belonging that we need from one another. Okay, a lot of this reading is not so much definitions, it's more informative. It talks about our social life and the social impact of motivation. We're social creatures. Humans are social beings and are motivated because of group interaction. Before one can have a high self-esteem, is what Maslow believed, one needs to have the basic needs met and a sense of belonging. So if you kind of took reference to the hierarchy of needs, at the bottom are our basic biological needs. We need food, we need water, we need sleep. Okay, we need to be able to go to the bathroom. And then once we have a sense of that, we can move on to caring about our safety. Okay, do we have security of ourself and our well-being, of our family? We have security of our health. Okay, you can't really start thinking about your goals until you have an idea of who you are. Once you have a sense of safety, you could then move on to really have a sense of love and belonging. This is the section we're going to specifically look at. How do you form friendships? Why is family so important? The next set of video we'll talk a little bit about sexual motivation, but why is it important to have that sexual intimacy with somebody? What can that friendship and family do for our sense of a sense of self-esteem? Maslow really believes that you can't really feel confident about yourself until you have that sense of, yes, I'm part of a group. Yes, people are supporting me. I have a family or friends that love me. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be family and friends. It just needs to be that group that is very supportive of you. Esteem, then, is that sense of self-esteem, self-confidence. You feel like you have a sense of achievement. You have respect from others. You respect others. And I think a lot of people end up kind of plateauing here. They kind of really are unsure about themselves and who they are. And it takes a long time for them to really process that. And then the highest sense, again, is self-actualization. You really believe who you are. You're able to understand your problem-solving skills. You lack any type of prejudice. You don't judge. You have really good morals. You're not lying or cheating, or you accept the facts of who you are and are ready to kind of continue on with life. So I think that stage is really hard to achieve because I think we're constantly questioning who are we and kind of making judgments of other people. And then before we saw that self-transience, this is that higher sense of being beyond understanding who you are. You're trying to understand, where do we go after the sense of who we are. Find life beyond that meaning. So kind of like the Buddha understanding. Okay, so kind of bringing us back to that sense of belonging. Belonging helps us in the survival instincts. Social bonds boost our ancestors' survival rates. So when they were more part of a group, survival rates would increase. Attachment, we talked about before. We talked about it with Harry Harlow. We talked about it with the monkey study. It serves a powerful survival impulse. Okay, stronger relationships as adults would produce offspring. So those people who had stronger relationships, and when we mature and when we are adults, we're more prone to have kids and have that survival instinct there. Ancestors were better in battles. With more assistance. So we have that, obviously, if they were in a group setting, they were more prone to survive in that sense. People who live in groups live a stronger and healthier life, and that is seen in numerous societies. So we want to belong. Not only does it aid in survival, but we also want to belong. The need to belong is a big key in happiness. When surveyed, the majority of people who were asked what made them happy the last week, most people talked about relationships. Okay, so if you ask me what was the best part of my last week, I might say hanging out with my family, my friends, seeing my mom, seeing my nieces and nephews, versus getting a paycheck. Okay, so when we're talking about those kinds of things, what really essentially in our, deep within us, it really is our relationships with others. We feel a better sense of belonging, and our self-esteem increases. So when we feel like we actually are part of something, we actually are more happy, and then we can become more confident about ourselves. Often our behavior conforms to fit in with others, to be happy. Often the big thing apart what motivates us is we're constantly trying to fit in with others. We're constantly trying to be on Facebook or social media to see what's going on with other people. We wear certain clothes to fit in. We listen to certain songs, all to have that sense of belonging. And if you ever saw the movie Castaway, Tom Hanks there finds a beach ball, and he even wants to have a friend. So he names his friend and he calls him Wilson, and he talks to Wilson because he just needs somebody. He wants to have that acceptance, and he kind of looks at Wilson every so often, and he asks for Wilson's opinion. Even though Wilson's not talking back, he just needs somebody. Sustaining relationships. Now, how do we kind of sustain them or keep them? For various reasons, people are separated and isolated. Isolation is a fear for most humans. We never really want to be alone. Okay, occasionally, you got that hour or two at home alone and you're like, yes, but for long periods of time, we don't like being without our relationships. When fear of being alone seems worse than the pain of emotional or physical abuse, a lot of people, attachments can keep people in abusive relationships. Okay, that relationship is really bad, but you just can't leave that person because you don't want to be without them. You'd rather go through physical abuse and emotional abuse than to be alone. And that is something that's kind of really interesting with humans. We'll stay where we are, even with a really mean friend, because you don't want to be without friends. Okay, studies where childs have lacked strong relationship in the future, they had issues with trust. So there's been numerous studies where kids have been abused, or they've been in houses where there weren't strong relationships between mother, father, and you, or brother, sister, you. Those kids really, in the future, lack the ability of trust, unless kind of what we talked about before, they understood it and they really worked at it. Disruptions in relationship can lead to instability later in life. So if you're a child that went from foster home to foster home to foster home, you might never really feel like you had a sense of a group dynamics, and then you kind of really struggled later in forming relationships later in life. Grew up in isolated households. There were studies done that children and adults struggled with anxiety, were often withdrawn, and were very quiet. Okay, so some of those cases where you see having a hard time building relationships, it is going to it's going to affect one later in life, according to various studies. Sustaining relationships kind of continue when someone threatens our social ties, our functioning breaks down, and we can't continue with our daily activity because we are overcome with guilt, jealousy, and loneliness. Okay, so when something happens with our social ties, our social group, a lot of the times we cannot move on. We can't think about anything else because we're so upset, or we're so thinking about this other issue. So, a death of a family, a breakup, a lot of the time your world kind of freezes in that moment, and you really can't go to school, you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't do your daily activities because you're so built up about this. Breakups, deaths, or divorce. Our life for a short time is in a state of transition. Okay? And those coping skills and those understandings of how to overcome us, that essentially makes us stronger. And having a sense of self-esteem, a high sense of self-esteem, really allows us to overcome those situations. College is even a transition period for parents and children. Moving can be stressful. It's filled with anxiety or sadness. And for a short time, you're really trying to, not only are you trying to find new relationships, but you're trying to figure out how to cope without those relationships. When one feels confident with a sense of belonging, we often have a higher self-esteem. Okay, and I do have a picture of the 3 girls that were isolated from the outside world in 2002. They were taken by Ariel Castro, and they were taken and they lived in a house together until 2013. They were isolated, and you could see the bonds that they formed with one another were extremely strong during that time. And we'll kind of talk about in class what social isolation can really do to an individual. The pain of ostracism. Sometimes the need of belonging is denied. you're not accepted in a group, you don't have maybe individuals that are supporting you. In this case, it is known as ostracism or social exclusion. Humans usually control social behavior, okay? And people were asked when they felt good about themselves, and people always tied it to achievement a lot of the times. However, when asked when someone made them feel bad, they discussed a bad relationship. Ostracism, bullying, can do a lot of psychological effects. It can have long-term effects on people when they are not accepted in a group. Think about what happens when you lose somebody or you're isolated from a situation. It really makes you feel terrible. So ostracism can have, like I said, long-term effects on an individual. Bullying in society, cyber ostracism is a huge thing. They're avoided online. They're not accepted as Facebook friends. There's a lot of studies going on with that and how that's impacting individuals, especially at that age in Erikson, which we talked about, middle school, when they're trying to be accepted by their peers. Studies on the brain show that when someone is angry, it activates a certain area of the brain that controls anger, the amygdala. Okay, the frontal cortex, which controls logic and thought and reasoning, is really shut off. So when we're really angry, we don't really have a lot of self-control. We're just thinking about and harboring those angry thoughts. We act in aggressive ways or self-destructive ways. So a lot of the times when we're really angry, we're really sad, because we've been ostracized or because we don't have acceptance, it can cause a lot of damage in the long run. So to kind of wrap up this video, this talks more about social motivation, the sense of being along with other people, and make sure you know kind of the impact of what could happen to an individual if they don't have that sense of belonging.